In the 1980s, the Middle East was set for a collision of two irrational regimes. On one side, Iraq, under the control of Saddam Hussein. On the other, Iran, who recently fell to an Islamic theocracy fueled by revolutionary zeal. Eventually, conflict began between the two nations. This was the Iran-Iraq War, an 8-year-long devastating conflict which cost hundreds of thousands of lives for soldiers and civilians on both sides, only to end in a stalemate. So since neither side actually achieved their objectives, this made me wonder, what if Iran won the war? First, some brief history. What led to the Iran-Iraq War? Going back to the eve of the war in 1980, the political climate had dramatically shifted in the Middle East. Iran's secular but corrupt Shah had been overthrown in an Islamic revolution, turning the nation into a theocratic state. Their neighbor to the west, Iraq, had been under the control of the Ba'athist Party for years, Saddam Hussein at its head. While Ba'athism already was an ideology of Arab superiority, Saddam believed Iraq was the superior nation of the Arab world, and he wanted to show it through military might. Iran controlled a predominantly Arab region neighboring Iraq called Khuzestan. Saddam hated the idea of Persians controlling Arabs and wished to take it, while also taking control of the Shatt al-Arab, the connecting point of the Tigris and Euphrates, which both countries shared. Now, when the Islamic Revolution occurred in Iran, Khomeini called for the overthrow of secular governments like Saddam's, calling for the spread of Islamic fundamentalism throughout the Muslim world. This really didn't please Saddam. While Iran was in political disarray, Saddam saw it as the perfect opportunity to invade and seize valuable land and resources. On September 22, 1980, Iraq's ground forces swept across into Iran, taking land in Khuzestan and western territory of the country. However, Saddam terribly miscalculated. Instead of his invasion disbanding Iran's people, it rallied them around the new government, with thousands volunteering to fight. Due to poor planning, Iraq allowed Iran to organize themselves, and soon enough, Iran fought back. The counterattack forced Saddam to retreat his forces behind the border. Angry at the incursion, Iran went on the offensive into Iraq, aiming to overthrow Saddam and to install a theocratic government of their own. However, their invasion was stalled as well. Eventually, the war went into a stalemate. The two countries, evenly matched, began to fight similar to World War I, Iraq using mustard gas attacks on both civilians and troops alike, Iran launching massive human wave attacks. Just total war. Nobody was safe from the conflict, and civilians were always stuck in the crossfire. In an effort to draw in the superpowers, Saddam bombed Iranian shipping in the Persian Gulf. Iraq's oil was carried through foreign ships due to Iran landlocking the country, and so when Iran did retaliate, they attacked Kuwaiti and Saudi ships carrying Iraqi oil. This attack on the oil angered much of the world. Countries like the US, USSR, and Britain began to fund Saddam's army to combat Iran and protect their own oil shipping in the Gulf. Eventually, after years of constant fighting, attacks on civilians, and hundreds of thousands of deaths on both sides, Iraq and Iran agreed on peace. The borders went back to their previous boundaries, and neither gained an advantage from the conflict. Now, this topic will be split into two videos. This video will focus on what if Iran won the war? It's kind of a trick question, because if Iran did take Baghdad, they could have won the war, if it was just between them and Iraq. But in reality, Iran never would have been allowed to achieve victory against Saddam, at least depending on how they fought the war. Iran was universally hated throughout the globe by both the West and the Soviets. The Ayatollah and Islamic fundamentalism isolated the country. For both Saddam and the US, there was fear the Islamic fundamentalists would spread their revolution to other nations as well. Reagan remarked, the US would do all in its power to make sure Iran does not achieve victory against Iraq. In our timeline, this was by giving weapons and equipment to Saddam's army to use. In this alternate timeline, Iran pushes back Saddam's military past the Iraqi boundary, reclaiming the land they lost and this time deciding to go on the offensive. In this alternate timeline, although unrealistic, Iran is able to overthrow Saddam Hussein's regime, either by capturing Baghdad or by funding an uprising among the Kurdish and Shia population against the Ba'athist government. Either way, Iran's total victory was to install a Shia fundamentalist government inside Iraq. If they achieved this, Iran would have been at war with the United States and her allies. Saddam, while a brutal madman, was still seen as a deterrent to Islamic Iran. If Iran overthrew Saddam, they would have seen airstrikes, bombings, and perhaps even international boots on the ground. Imagine a situation like the Persian Gulf War, but instead of Iraq being the enemy, it's Iran, and instead of Kuwait being the occupied ally, it's Iraq. bombings of Tehran and Persian cities by the West could occur, enough to convince the Iranians victory could not be possible, and force them to the negotiating table. In our timeline, the Kurds, who had been fighting for independence for decades, became allies with Iran to combat Saddam. However, this insurgency ended when Saddam used chemical weapons to wipe out entire Kurd villages. In this alternate timeline, since the West would aim to kick Iran out, the Kurds could have potentially become enemies with the US, since US interest would be to keep Saddam in power. This is just a footnote speculation though. In summary, if Iran defeated the Iraqis and were able to overthrow Saddam or capture Baghdad, they would face an international coalition similar to the Persian Gulf War. This wouldn't be an Iraq War situation like in 2003, as Saddam's party and military would not have been disbanded, allowing for a vile but stable government to come back in power. In this alternate timeline, Iraq becomes a US partner. The relationship is built on the transfer of oil and deterring Iranian superiority in the region. Saddam's regime is brutal, but the US doesn't seem to have a problem with that in our timeline, so I don't see that as an issue in this alternate one. Iran is even further isolated from the world. Whether or not Iran would have been invaded by international forces during the war is hard to predict. If they were not overthrown, the Iranian state would be even more zealous. In this alternate timeline, Saddam never invades Kuwait because it was directly the actions of the Iran-Iraq War which led to the invasion and the Gulf War in the first place. I'll explain more in detail in my next video, part 2, what if Iraq won the Iran-Iraq War? This video was suggested by Patreon contributor Jesse. Thank you, Jesse, for your support and for suggesting such a fascinating topic. As for the rest, like on Facebook and subscribe if you have not done so. This is Cody from the Alternate History Hub.